Good evening. The date is Saturday, March 28th, 2026, and the United States has effectively come to a standstill. From the most densely populated urban centers to the quietest rural jurisdictions, a massive, unprecedented mobilization of American citizens is currently unfolding in the streets. This is the third iteration of what has become known as the No Kings movement, and the sheer scale of today's demonstrations is actively paralyzing the normal operations of the country. Organizers and local law enforcement agencies are reporting that more than 3,100 individual demonstrations are actively taking place right now. To put that number into perspective, there are just over 3,100 counties in the entire United States. We are witnessing a physical demonstration in virtually every single county across all 50 states, reaching as far as isolated communities inside the Alaskan Arctic Circle. The demographics of these crowds are shifting the political landscape in real time. This is no longer just a coalition of traditional political activists. The footage coming into our newsroom shows massive suburban groundswells. We are seeing a profound intersection of working-class families, union members, healthcare advocates, and ordinary citizens who have reached a breaking point with the current administration. Crowd scientists and municipal authorities are projecting that by nightfall, between 15 and 20 million Americans will have participated in these peaceful marches. This completely dwarfs the previous mobilizations we saw back in June and October of last year. During those earlier protests, the administration attempted to counter the public outcry with aggressive displays of state power, running localized military drills and attempting to stage counter-programming parades to intimidate demonstrators. Those tactics have completely failed. Today, the administration is facing a citizenry that has simply refused to be broken, standing shoulder to shoulder in a stunning rebuke of authoritarianism. The central demand of the millions marching today is deeply rooted in the fundamental principles of the American Republic, the absolute rejection of autocratic rule, and the dismantling of what protesters are calling the oligarch class. The outrage is completely palpable. Citizens are marching for universal access to health care, the right to afford a home, and the basic dignity of a living wage. They are demanding a return to a society that prioritizes human life over corporate extraction. But beneath these broad economic demands is a furious, targeted anger directed at the deeply disturbing associations and actions of the highest levels of the government. We are seeing thousands of signs in the crowds today, specifically calling out the administration's active protection of individuals associated with high-profile sex trafficking networks. The public has not forgotten the Jeffrey Epstein files, and the anger has reached a boiling point over the administration's blatant efforts to shield the guilty. Protesters are actively calling out the president's inner circle, pointing directly to figures like Howard Lutnick and others who are known to have traveled to Epstein's island. The public is furious that these individuals are not facing criminal scrutiny, but are instead being shielded by the highest office in the land. This anger was severely compounded by the actions of administration loyalists like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, who orchestrated the transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell to minimum security club-fed facilities. The American people are watching the justice system being actively manipulated to protect a cabal of wealthy predators, and they are demanding the immediate appointment of an independent special prosecutor to tear open the Epstein files once and for all. This domestic corruption is playing out against the backdrop of a catastrophic and rapidly expanding foreign policy disaster. The administration has rushed headlong into a brutal, highly controversial war alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against Iran. The intelligence and ground reports coming out of the region detail absolute horrors. The military campaign has not been limited to strategic defense targets. We are receiving confirmed reports of airstrikes decimating elementary schools, resulting in the mass casualties of children, including the deaths of 165 young girls in a single coordinated bombing campaign. Furthermore, the military operations have aggressively targeted vital civilian infrastructure. Desalination plants necessary for basic drinking water and regional electrical grids have been completely destroyed, plunging millions of innocent civilians into dark, lethal conditions. International observers are openly classifying these actions as war crimes. And the violence has only continued to spread, heavily impacting civilian populations across Beirut, Lebanon, and Gaza. While the administration pours billions of dollars and military resources into these foreign conflicts under the guise of being peacemakers, the domestic economy is buckling. The citizens marching today are facing crushing, surging inflation. The dream of home ownership has evaporated for the working class. And while the public struggles to afford basic groceries, the federal government is heavily subsidizing the fossil fuel industry in a manner that defies all modern economic and environmental logic. In a story that has severely escalated the public's anger today, we have uncovered the details of a staggering, unprecedented transfer of taxpayer wealth. The administration has taken nearly $1 billion of public money and handed it directly to the French energy giant Total Energies. But they did not pay this money to build infrastructure. They paid this foreign corporation to explicitly cancel and walk away from two massive, fully planned offshore wind energy projects located off the coasts of New York and North Carolina. These renewable energy projects were projected to provide clean, reliable power to over 1 million American homes. The administration used your tax dollars to kill that infrastructure. And what did Total Energies do with that billion-dollar public payout? They immediately reinvested it into fossil fuels. They are using American tax dollars to expand deep-water oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, to massively increase natural gas exports out of Texas, and to construct new gas-powered plants. At a time when global instability is causing energy prices to violently fluctuate, and when the scientific consensus demands an immediate transition to renewable energy, the government is literally paying foreign conglomerates to destroy clean energy projects and double down on the exact carbon emissions driving the climate crisis. State leaders across the eastern seaboard are completely outraged, but the administration has completely ignored their protests. The authoritarian posture of the executive branch is not limited to financial handouts for oligarchs. It is being violently enforced on the streets by federal agents operating with near total impunity. Protesters today are demanding immediate and severe reforms to the operations of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and the Border Patrol. These agencies are being deployed in American cities using tactics that lawmakers are openly comparing to the Gestapo. We are seeing federal agents operating outside the bounds of constitutional law, utilizing terror tactics in suburban neighborhoods. The legislative fight over this unchecked power came to a head on Capitol Hill late last night. The Senate was forced to move on a massive funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security, but progressive lawmakers drew a hard line. Congressman Jimmy Gomez of California issued a searing indictment of the federal agencies, outright refusing to vote for the funding bill because it lacked any basic guardrails for ICE and CBP. Congressman Gomez detailed horrifying incidents from his own district, including a constituent who died under suspicious circumstances while in ICE custody, and an 8 months pregnant woman who was detained and summarily deported. She was completely lost in the federal system, unable to contact her family until she was already out of the country. Lawmakers are demanding the absolute bare minimum of accountability. They are demanding that ICE agents remove their tactical masks and identify themselves, that they be required to wear active body cameras, and that they completely cease the practice of kicking in residential doors without a signed judicial warrant. But the Republican establishment appears completely unwilling to rein in these federal forces. Congressman Jim McGovern pointed out the massive financial disparities at play, noting that the federal government currently appropriates more money for ICE than the majority of independent nations spend on their entire national militaries. He plainly stated that these agencies are operating as rogue entities that kill people, and he flatly refused to authorize another dime for their operations. This legislative chaos was compounded by the president's attempt to govern by decree. After Republicans intentionally stalled a funding deal for weeks, forcing Transportation Security Administration workers to go without pay, the president swooped in with an executive order to unilaterally fund the TSA. Congresswoman Becca Balint pointed out the terrifying reality of this maneuver. The legislative branch has completely surrendered its constitutional power of the purse to the executive. The Republicans created a crisis, starved federal workers of their paychecks, and then allowed the president to bypass Congress entirely to look like a savior, fundamentally breaking the separation of powers. This consolidation of power is being actively cheered by a handful of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. During the last major mobilization, Senator Bernie Sanders delivered a speech that has become the defining manifesto of these protests. He explicitly named Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg, identifying them as the architects of a hijacked economic and political system. Sanders reminded the public that the American Republic was founded in the 1770s on the explicit rejection of the divine right of kings. And he warned that the nation must now utterly reject the divine right of modern oligarchs. These billionaires have funded the current political regime, and in return, they have seen their wealth and unaccountable power multiply exponentially, while working families are crushed under the weight of inflation and systemic corruption. In response to this massive public uprising, the administration and its allies have launched a coordinated campaign to destroy independent media and reshape the national narrative. Brendan Carr, the commissioner of the Federal Communications Commission, has openly bragged about the administration's successful efforts to purge dissenting voices from the airwaves. The government has successfully executed a campaign to defund the Public Broadcasting Service and National Public Radio. They are openly celebrating the removal of veteran journalists from major networks, cheering the departures of reporters who challenged their narratives. The FCC is actively endorsing the corporate takeovers of legacy news organizations, pushing for new ownership structures at major networks designed to turn independent journalism into state-sanctioned public relations. But while the administration attempts to project total control, the internal communications coming from the president's inner circle portray an administration completely detached from reality. In the last 24 hours, Vice President J.D. Vance sat for an interview where he engaged in a bizarre, deeply unserious conversation about the nature of unidentified flying objects. While millions of Americans march in the streets for basic economic survival, and while the military is dropping bombs in the Middle East, the Vice President of the United States used his public platform to earnestly declare that UFOs are not extraterrestrial, but are in fact literal biblical demons. This level of severe detachment has alienated even the administration's former media allies. Podcaster Joe Rogan, who has historically provided a massive platform for right-wing ideology, publicly turned on the MAGA movement this week. Rogan explicitly mocked the political base, calling them a cult of personality built by unintelligent, uninteresting people clinging to a fraudulent movement. When confronted with this massive defection by one of the largest media figures in the world, the vice president could only offer a weak defense, claiming that the political left simply had more dorks than the political right. It is a stunning display of juvenile behavior from an executive branch facing the largest domestic crisis of the century. And at the center of it all is the president himself. In a statement released to his supporters as the protests began to swell, he completely ignored the millions of people marching against his administration. He ignored the failing economy, the housing crisis, the wars, and the corruption scandals. Instead, he released a video message bragging about his own perceived popularity. He claimed that the United States is now respected like never before, stating that the nation was a joke a year and a half ago, but is now, in his exact words, the hottest country anywhere in the world. He believes the country is, quote, hot. Meanwhile, the streets are filled with millions of citizens who are completely exhausted, terrified for their future, and absolutely resolute in their determination to remove this regime from power. The public has recognized the grave consequences of authoritarian rule. They have seen the data. They are feeling the economic pain. They are watching their neighbors being terrorized by federal agents. They are watching their tax dollars flow to foreign oil conglomerates and domestic billionaires. They are watching the justice system protect predators. But despite the grim reality of this current era, the defining characteristic of today's nationwide mobilization is not despair. It is an overwhelming, profound sense of endurance. The millions of people in the streets today are peacefully demonstrating that they have not been broken. They are standing up for basic humanity, for equality, for the protection of marginalized communities, and for the fundamental survival of the democratic system. They are sending a clear, undeniable message to the highest levels of power that the American people will not accept the divine right of kings, nor will they accept the divine right of the oligarchs who fund them. The protests are expected to continue deep into the night, shutting down major thoroughfares from Los Angeles to Chicago to Washington, D.C. We will keep our reporters on the ground and our cameras rolling in every major city as this historic, unprecedented day in American history continues to unfold. Stay with us.